Hello, everyone. This is another episode of the Unisolve Question, a YouTube show and podcast about lawyers. Please subscribe and like. I have Doron Gold here with me today. He is a psychotherapist and a lawyer. This is a great combination. We will talk a lot about issues that lawyers have, and I'm sure the audience is familiar with those. So, hello, Doron. How are you?
I'm great. It's so nice to be here, Paulette. Thank you.
It's really good to have you. Everyone likes a free psychotherapy session. So not that I'm going to make it about me. I want to talk about your name. So your middle name is Jonathan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you go by Doron.
Yes.
What is the origin of your first name?
Actually, the origin of both names is Hebrew. Doron is a gift.
Doron.
And my mother thought me a gift, and so she named me a gift. Jonathan in Hebrew is Yonatan, which is God-given. So she put the whole name together, and I'm a God-given gift. And if you really want to add my last name to it, you can add a God-given gift of gold, but that's going a little far, I think.
This is great. So my question is, have you ever gone by Jonathan, or do you always go by Doron?
Fascinating question, because yes, for a very small snippet of grade 4, I believe, I went by Jonathan because I thought Doron was weird and I didn't want to have a weird name. So I insisted that the teachers call me Jonathan for about half a year in elementary school, and I got over it, and I've been Doron ever since.
So I also am familiar with having a weird name. And in this respect, I want to ask you if you don't think that Doron is weird anymore, and when you stop thinking that, and why?
I stopped thinking it when I stopped caring what people think. To me, Doron is weird is strange because weird can be,
Good or bad?
Well, it's something that people don't recognize as one thing, okay?
Yes.
But something people have trouble pronouncing is a separate category of difficult, right? Because with me, I tell them my name, and more often than not, you mean like Duran? Like that people like to spell my name with different vowels. They, for some reason, don't like the 2 O's. So that is the part of the name that sometimes is challenging. And lots of people experience that. Lots of people recognize that, the extra labor of having a name that requires explanation. But honestly, I like my name.
Yes, there's definitely sort of a transaction cost of having a non-WASPy name here in North America. North America is really self-centered, if I may say so. And it's not a criticism. It's just I'm sharing my personal experience. But I'm always interested in people who deliberately accepted this transaction cost, even though they were born. I assume you were born in Canada, right?
Yeah.
You were born in Toronto?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't born in Canada, and where I was born, my name was not weird, and then there was a decision to make my way to North America, and then there you go. I tried going by Paul a little bit, but it didn't feel right, so that was weird to me.
It's also cultural, right? Some cultures, a lot of I've met a lot of Chinese people who take on an Americanized name or a North Americanized name. I know Russian people who have taken on a name like I won't even say, I don't want to identify anyone, but but there are people who they don't want the name that's different. Even my uncle, and I'll say it in the proper Hebrew, Chaim, with the guttural Chaim. He came in the 50s. He worked at IBM for about 40 years. He was Sam. Sam. He was Sam for 40 years because Chaim is, you can hurt yourself if you say it wrong.
Yeah. Yes. Interesting. So you're a lawyer and a psychotherapist. So how long have you been a psychotherapist now?
Technically speaking, I completed my master's of social work in 2012.
Mm-hmm. So almost 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how long had you been a lawyer before you became a psychotherapist?
I got called to the bar in 1996. Mm-hmm. I practiced up until 2006, early 2006. So I was a lawyer for about 10 years. And it's interesting you say I'm a psychotherapist and a lawyer, as though I'm still a lawyer. If you ask my wife, she would say you are still a lawyer because she wants to be married to a lawyer, in spite of the fact that she met me after I stopped practicing. But I think of myself as a former lawyer, a recovering lawyer, because it's been now, how long? 15 years since I practiced law. That's enough time to say I was. I know a lot about it because I've worked in the field with lawyers since then. I've worked in lawyer assistance for that entire time. So I'm immersed in lawyers. We're on Law Twitter. I'm immersed in lawyers on Twitter. I know the area. It's an area perhaps of expertise, you could say. But to say I'm a lawyer always makes me think, when's my next, court appearance?
Well, you're still registered with the Law Society as a
I am.
lawyer, albeit in a non-practicing status. You're also registered with the College of Social Workers.
Hmm.
The reason I ask you about the length of your experience is because I wanted to show everyone that you know a lot about practice of law. You're not just a
Hmm.
psychotherapist. You
Oh yeah.
practice law. You're a
Oh,
lawyer in name now, but you practice law for real for a long time,
mhm.
and you also work a lot with lawyers now, right, as your patients. So, do you think that being a lawyer causes mental illness and sometimes suicide?
A really, really loaded question. Causes, well, causation is an interesting problem, right? Sometimes being in that environment exacerbates potentially mental illness, but then sometimes being a cab driver exacerbates mental illness. It's not inherent to law that one suffers with emotional or mental challenges. And I'm always a little bit hesitant around words like illness. It's a very medical model, and while it's a nuanced point, sometimes people really benefit from having a diagnosis, a name from the DSM-5. I have clinical depression. Oh, that's why I feel this way. And now I have a plan for getting better. People want that diagnosis. Sometimes it's a relief to know that it's a thing that can be identifiable and treated. On the other hand, um, it is pathologizing inherently. It's labeling, which therefore leads to it being potentially stigmatizing. And so I like to talk about, you know, challenges, because honestly, if a person is, let's say, doing a law job that they really don't like, but they feel trapped because they have lots of debt, and it's the middle of COVID and they're isolated and they're a first year associate and they don't have much mentorship because there's too much distance with the people they work with, that causes for a lot of people, including some of my current clients, considerable amount of distress. Sometimes there are days when they don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes the distress mimics medical conditions like depression. Sometimes they are medical conditions like depression, but they're intertwined with the life conditions. So illness, you get cancer, you've got a tumor, you can identify the tumor, you can put it through pathology and identify what kind of tumor it is and identify what kind of treatment. With something like depression, since I'm talking about that, it really kind of sits in a middle place sometimes, where the person is exhibiting what you would call symptoms, but really they're just experiencing the impact of their life circumstances, which if they could alter those life circumstances, or if they could alter the way they approach their life circumstances, they could get alleviation of those quote unquote symptoms. So I'm always hesitant about going to the illness place, because to me, it's life. Life is stressful sometimes. Life is stressful for many people, enormously so. And I don't want to turn that into pathology because it's coping with and managing life.
Is there a conflict between medicine and psychotherapy? A philosophical conflict?
There can be, sure. Start with the fact that, I hate to say it, but often in the medical field, psychiatrists are viewed as the bottom of the barrel, even though they're dealing with perhaps the most complex topic. And so there's this, if you go to your family doctor and you have an ache in your elbow, they'll go ahead and do a few things to figure out what's going on. If you go to your family doctor and you are having trouble breathing, they will do certain things. You go to your family doctor and you say, I'm having trouble getting up in the morning. It's like you're speaking a different language. A lot of them are not taught in medical school how to take in that kind of information, assess that kind of information. And the truth is, unlike something like a broken leg, which is very much technical, something like emotional distress, like grief, which isn't pathological at all, it's quite healthy, but still quite painful, requires a level of tools that are not about, physical tools or diagnostic tools. They're talk about empathy. One of the best ways that a psychotherapist engages a client and helps a client is by simply being there with them, witnessing them in their place, empathizing with them, having compassion, validating their experience. Those things to medical doctors often feel very mushy, nondescript, undefinable. And so it's an area they often don't want to go to. They want to go to the definable. They want to go to the codifiable. Show me a study. Show me best practices. Show me evidence-based. And sometimes it's simply the ability to sit with someone and have them feel like you validate their experience. You don't judge them, and they can be themselves, even if it's at a painful point.
There is a popular opinion, well, at least it's popular now, that people who experience challenges that you talked about should not be addressed or blamed for that, should not be asked to take care of it themselves, should not be told to help themselves, that they should not be so it should not be suggested to them that they are the source of their own problems, right? So this is, I think, a fairly new popular opinion. I think it's fair to say that before, at least maybe 100 or 50 years ago, the opposite was a popular opinion. You just said that we shouldn't view those issues, the mental health issues, or maybe I shouldn't even use the word health, because you said you only use the word illness. We shouldn't view these as disease. We should view them as challenges.
Not so much that we shouldn't, because some of them are actual diseases.
Right.
Clinical depression is a disease. Bipolar disorder is a disease. It's just I don't default to using the term mental illness. Mental health, absolutely. We want health. It's a health condition.
Mm-hmm.
Being healthy is good. I just avoid the word illness because there's a connotation to it that's just being broken somehow or faulty. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it's just the management of everyday life. And sometimes it just happens to be difficult everyday life.
Right. So where's the threshold between self-help and seeking help?
The way you framed the question was fascinating, because I feel like you almost mixed some things together. So you said not to blame someone. Yes, don't blame them. You said, what was it? There were a couple things where you said that it's not that they're not the cause. Right, they're not the cause. But should they seek help? Absolutely. Should you go up to them and say, you need help? Probably not. But can you walk alongside them and offer them compassion and listen to them? And perhaps in the context of having met them where they are without any judgment, ask them about, are they doing anything to alleviate their suffering? Would they be interested in a suggestion? Not telling them what to do as much as, the lawyer way, here's what you should do. The idea being, it is on the person ultimately most of the time. Sometimes the person absolutely can't, but it is on the person to advocate for themselves, to seek help for themselves. So for instance, if you talk about someone who has an alcohol addiction, it's not their fault that the disease of addiction has invaded them, has taken them over, has really taken a toll on their lives. But it is ultimately going to be for them to come to the realization that in their life, the alcohol is toxic for them and they need to do something about it. And the thing they need to do about it more than anything else is reach out for help, because they don't actually usually know what to do about it. And why would they? Asking for help is something the individual in many cases has to do. It has to be a voluntary process. If you have people who were court ordered to go to addiction treatment, they're not necessarily cooperative patients in an inpatient setting because they were mandated to go. When you are engaging someone for mental health purposes, for the purposes of healing, they actually have to be on side with you. They have to identify there's something that they don't like about their situation, identify that they'd like it to change, maybe identify they're not sure that they can change, the helplessness and the hopelessness, but identify that if it could change, they'd like it to, so that they will engage. They will go in it with a whole heart. And in many ways, that's the only way for it to make a difference, because they have to believe in what they're doing. So that's the thing. They do need to reach out for help, because it's hard to do these things alone. And in fact, I'll even add the fact that the isolation and the loneliness increases the pain, increases the judgment. Because as you said, we don't blame them. Well, they'll often blame themselves. They will often hold themselves as doing wrong. In the legal profession context, a lawyer suffering with anxiety will often not tell anyone and will not want anyone to know, because they will look around them and see all of their colleagues looking all, buttoned up like you look right now, and thinking, this guy's got it together. It must just be me, because we're in a profession full of super people. And from that comes shame. What they don't know is it's a profession full of humans, and lots of people suffering with lots of different kinds of challenges. They just don't talk to each other about it. So they all think they're the only one, which increases the stigma, increases the pain, increases the isolation, and keeps someone, therefore, from asking for help.
You just mentioned one issue in the legal profession, or one hazard, I guess, in the legal profession. It's peer pressure. It's being surrounded by people who value achievement and who project achievement, and being in a profession that emphasizes achievement and, in fact, triumph over someone else, defeat, victory. It's very adversarial. So that's one issue that can be hazardous to someone's mental health. Can you talk about some others? Can you list the things that are really hazards in the law practice? So people, there are a lot of people on Twitter now giving advice to law students.
I just did it this morning.
This is the time of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people who consider law school, people who are in law school, young lawyers, isn't it unfair that they never are told about hazards? Someone who's going into to join firefighters, they will be told what health hazards are. Someone who is going to be in the military, they will know what the hazards are. But when people consider being a lawyer, no one tells them what the actual health hazards are, and not just some vague notions, but specific hazards that need to be monitored, because they can cause issues with mental health. And we talked about peer pressure. Can you list some others?
You brought up really interesting analogies to firefighters and soldiers. Truth is, they're very good analogies to lawyers, because for the longest time, they didn't really have the mental hazards alluded to either in their training. They're just tough guys, and they were usually guys, because the guys were the only ones let in. And the idea that someone might have a post-traumatic reaction to an incident, the idea that someone might in the field see a child harmed, or a gunshot wound, or whatever the case may be, was just part of the job. Just like the idea that a criminal lawyer would see some evidence that was upsetting, just part of the job. So the analogy is really good, because they weren't really trained in mental health either, and they were also judged themselves if they weren't coping well. That is changing in those fields. It is changing in, amongst crowns, for instance. It is changing amongst the legal profession, hence people like me who do in fact go into, I'm going to be speaking at 3 or 4 law schools in the next couple of weeks during orientations. I've been doing it for years now, giving them a heads up on day one. There are other things you should be thinking about. There are other considerations while you're going through this legal process, this legal education process. You also need to be considering, how is my health? Am I still sleeping? Am I still connecting with people? Is my level of expectation of myself reasonable? So here's one of the warning signs: perfectionism, endemic to the legal profession, also problematic to the nth degree, because perfection doesn't actually exist in the human condition other than perhaps in mathematics. And yet lawyers continue to strive for it, continue to try to be, as you said, the best. to beat the other side. Now, in the adversarial process, beating the other side is what you're supposed to do. Nothing inherently wrong with that. You're trying to get an outcome, and you're trying to do your best as an advocate to obtain that outcome. If, however, it then goes into your identity, your value as a human being, I am the best. I am a Bay Street lawyer and everyone knows it, and I've made it to the top of the mountain. Look at me. That doesn't necessarily improve mental health. In fact, there was a study out of the University of Toronto, a sociologist did a study around 2015, 16. I think that the term that came out of it was the status health paradox. In other words, they studied Bay Street lawyers and discovered they had a higher incidence of depression as compared to other lawyers. And the question was, why would lawyers who've made it, according to the definition, even though it's not correct, why would they be more depressed? Well, they're also working much longer hours. They also have much less autonomy over their time. They also have higher pressure around the matters they're dealing with, the type of clients they're dealing with, the type of other lawyers they're dealing with. The stresses are quite enormous for many people. The demands for billing hours and excellence is high. It affects their mood. And they've made it to the top of the mountain. Shouldn't they be happy? All the money they're making and everything else. The idea of status, I've always found in the work I do with lawyers, is a trap. In fact, another study, Larry Krieger is a professor in Florida. He studied legal professionals for years. He's written handbooks on law student mental health. He's amazing. And he did a study also of lawyers who pursued status versus lawyers who pursued service. I think those are the terms he used. And he found that the lawyers who pursued service, as in, legal aid lawyers, clinic lawyers, family lawyers in small firms versus lawyers who pursued, investment banking or mergers and acquisitions or whatever, that the lawyers who pursued service were often happier and healthier. Not that that's a universal concept, because there's lots of people in M&A who are really loving it, and it's the life they were meant to have. It's that a lot of people pursue status jobs because of the status, not because of the merits of the work, not because of the challenge, but because of what people will think, how it will look, how much money they'll make. That has diminishing returns, because you are who you are. Your identity is not what you do. You are who you are and how you treat people and who you love and who loves you. And in the meantime, you're also doing work which really fulfills you and is really satisfying. And that is part of who you are, but it doesn't define you. People who are looking at, am I where I should be as compared to the other people I went to law school with, that comparative thing that lawyers like to do, that gets them in trouble, because we can't compare our stories. Each story is an individual story. Each journey is one's own, incomparable to anyone else's. There's no right way to do anything, really, because we're learning about ourselves as we do these things. We're learning what's right as we go, including the fact that we change. 20 years ago, when I got out of law school in 1994, 27 years ago, I'm so old. I immediately thought, I don't want to be a lawyer. It's not for me. I didn't really like law school. And I looked into an MSW back then, but my mind at the time was centered on, I was very interested in politics. I was much more interested in social justice. I was interested in policy, macro things. When I did my MSW starting in 2009, it was all wanting to do one-on-one, one-on-two group counseling, therapy. I wasn't interested in the macro issues anymore in terms of being involved in them. I'm very interested in those issues, but my focus changed because I changed. So what's the right way to do that other than to adapt as we grow, observe ourselves, observe the world, adapt our expectations, our goals, our values, be ourselves without apology.
You started talking about why people become lawyers, essentially, right? And I'm curious, what are all the different reasons that people become lawyers? You've met so many lawyers, you've had so many lawyer patients. Why do people become lawyers?
Well, the easiest one is the people who knew since they were 3 that they wanted to be a lawyer. Those are easier because they've thought about it their whole lives and they've been really attracted to it. That, by the way, does not preclude them becoming lawyers and realizing they don't want to. because they never real we none of us knew. You knew that, you know this too, right, Paulette? You didn't know what being a lawyer was going to be like until you became a lawyer. My advice on apropos of what you said earlier, my advice on Twitter this morning for law students: don't listen to other law students. They have no idea what they're talking about. I've been saying that for years now because it's true. Law students make each other nuts with their opinions about what it takes to be a great lawyer. Law students have no idea what it takes to be a great lawyer. So they go into it for all kinds of reasons. They've always wanted to, or they were told they're very good at logic and argument. Maybe they should be a lawyer. Or they got to a point finishing up undergrad and didn't know what to do and thought professional school, well, medical school requires certain things, and I don't really want to be an accountant. Law school, it's kind of an open-ended thing. You can do lots of things with a law degree. Maybe I'll go to law school. And people like me, who I went to law school, I'm told, because I don't remember so long ago, because I thought it would be an entree into politics. I was working in party politics at the time. As a young man, I had started up political clubs at university and such. That was my passion back then in the late 80s. So law school was a way. All the people I knew in politics were lawyers. I guess you have to be a lawyer to get into politics. Prerequisite: I'll become a lawyer. I've checked that box and now I can go into politics. Problem was, by the time I got done with law school, I had lost my taste for party politics. I was too idealistic for it. Now what do I do with a law degree? So lots of people find that to be the case too.
Why do people stay lawyers? So I've practiced law for more than 10 years. You practiced law for more than 10 years. Someone always asks me if I like what I do, and I tell them, what do you think? I mean, are you suggesting that I'm masochistic, or that I'm irrational? Why would I stay in this profession for more than 10 years if I hated it, right? So, but then a lot of people drop out. And maybe there are some people who stay despite pain, despite all the bad things. So why do people stay lawyers in your experience?
First of all, lots and lots of people stay lawyers even though they don't want to be lawyers, and for various reasons. It's kind of a known commodity that when people talk about, when you ask a lawyer if they're happy, they're going to say, oh no, I'm miserable. That doesn't mean they're all miserable. It does mean, though, that there are a lot of lawyers who are misplaced in the profession. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't be in law. Maybe it just means that they shouldn't be in real estate law because they're interested in the environment, but they couldn't get an articling job in it. And now they're pigeonholed in real estate. Maybe it's because they got a Bay Street job, but they're really not the Bay Street type. But everyone told them Bay Street is the place to aspire to. Who walks away from that? So they stay. Again, reputation, what will people think? Who walks away from a Bay Street job, right? Well, lots of people walk away, whether to in-house or whether to go into smaller firms or whether to go out of law altogether. But you have to come to that. There's a way that the legal profession has, I coined it an unconscious treadmill. I'll say it quickly. I got into law school, so I have to go. I'm in law school, I have to finish. I finished law school, I have to article. I articled, I have to get called. I got called, I have to practice. I'm practicing, I have to make partner. No. Each step necessitating the next step without any stopping to, do just a quick check on, is this what I want? Am I where I want to be, or am I where I just ended up? Because the treadmill picked me up and carried me there. And then when I think I don't want to do this, but then your family says, but you worked so hard. And you're a lawyer. Why wouldn't you want to be a lawyer? It's so prestigious. I mean, there's so many reasons why people are hesitant. The biggest one, perhaps, is that mentality of perfectionism, the self-judgment leading to a sense of, I don't want to be thought of as a quitter. I'm not a quitter. I slay dragons. I don't succumb to them. I'm going to stay and figure out how to make this work. And that keeps them in it a long time. It kept me in it a long time. I often will quote Albert Einstein on this point, that everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will think it's stupid. And I will often say that there are a lot of fish trying to climb trees in the legal profession. Not necessarily that they shouldn't be lawyers, but maybe they shouldn't be government lawyers, or maybe they shouldn't be working in sole practice because it's too isolating. Whatever the point, it's very challenging for many to find their place, to find that groove where they're doing the kind of law they want to do and the kind of environment they want to do it in, with the kind of people they want to work with, and have the clients, the kind of clients they want to work with, making the kind of money that they want to make. A lot of variables they're trying to align. For many, it takes a while to get into that groove. And for some, they keep trying to find the groove, not realizing maybe the groove doesn't exist for them, like me. And it's time to go do something else, which can be scary, especially if you're of this generation and you got $100,000 in debt. It's a lot to carry.
Yes. What are the warning signs? How does a lawyer know that he or she are in the wrong place? So, for example, a simple answer, of course, is, are you happy? Right. But who knows what it means when you ask someone, when you ask a woman if she's happy with a man, she says, yes, he makes me laugh, or something like that. Right. We can't say that about the profession of law. Law practice makes me laugh. We can't say that. Maybe we can. So how do we tell if we're happy in law practice, or if there are enough red flags that we have to change something, or at least seek some help?
Start with the basic question I'll ask you. Are you happy in law practice?
Let me just switch to the gallery view. So my face goes on screen. Yes, I'm happy in law practice. If you want me to give a more detailed answer, I'll be happy to do it.
Like briefly, but just give an idea to those listening. When you ask a question of someone who actually is happy in law practice, what is it about it that, whether happy or fulfilled or satisfied or content, what is it about it that is making you think, yeah, I like this?
For me, it's the independence. For me, it's the flexibility. It's that I make my decisions. I make the decisions about my practice management. I make my decisions about the strategy in my clients' files. And very importantly, I make my decisions about what files to take. I think this is one of the most important things for me. So when I don't want to work hard, I don't work hard, unless, we're all officers of the court. Yes. We all owe very strict, important duties to our clients. But I'm convinced that urgency and emergencies are preventable. And if you have many emergencies, you're doing something wrong. So I dedicate a lot of my time to preventing emergencies, and I don't really experience emergencies often. And if you don't experience emergencies, I think that's almost 80% of being happy in law practice, at least in litigation. Yes, in my opinion. And again, this is an opinion of someone who's always had his own practice, who's always been his own boss.
So very focused on autonomy, focused on the ability to control your circumstances and keep fires from flaring. So I could say to you, I could be a lawyer who's a litigator who is great at avoiding emergencies, but is bored to tears by commercial litigation or construction liens, which I did for a while, or insurance defense, bores me to tears. I can't be happy doing accident benefits all day, because that wouldn't be interesting to me. But I could be happy potentially doing family law, because at least there's an element that fits in with my values, my interest in human beings. But maybe someone's really, really interested in transactions. They love making deals. They love corporate law. So you see, there's elements of who is the person, what are their values, what makes them passionate, and does their work give them a place to express those things? I'm getting a sense that your work gives you space to express who you are, to be you, so you're in alignment.
Can I challenge you a little bit?
Please.
So do you think that we as a society put too much emphasis on what we feel and following that feeling rather than constructing our feelings? So let me give you an example. I was a computer programmer before law school for years, and one of my mentors was my boss. When he hired me, he asked me if I did programming on Windows, and I said, I don't like Windows. I only work with Linux. And he told me, you will have to learn to like Windows. And I don't know if you ever worked deeply with computers or coded or anything like that, but there is quite a divide between people who like Windows and hate Windows. And I
Mhm.
hated Windows. And he told me, you will have to learn to like Windows. And I carried this phrase with me my whole life. He taught me that I can learn to like things, or at least tolerate them, and then find pleasure or inspiration or passion in other things. So, for example, of course, not all aspects of law practice are fun or interesting or inspiring. But if I feel like getting inspiration or having fun, I'm going to go to Law Twitter. I'm going to do an interview show. I'm going to have fun. At the end of the day, I have a family. I'm going to go to my family, right? So why are we so obsessed with making everything fun, with making everything feel good to us? Or should we?
So I take your comment as rooted in a kind of perfectionism, which is to say, um, uh, either I love my job. You're saying, why are people need to love their job completely? I don't know anybody who loves their job completely. I loved doing this job, the counseling job that I'm now doing in front of a screen. But a year and a half ago, I was driving to downtown Toronto every day, a long commute. I didn't like the commute. I couldn't learn to like the commute. I could maybe feel like it was like a private meditation, but frankly, it was just the Don Valley Parkway. So I didn't learn to love that. I didn't love the hustle and bustle of downtown. Um, of course, there are going to be elements of your job that are not optimal that you tolerate, but you used in the same word fun or tolerate. Those are two different things. There's lots of stuff you can learn to tolerate in your job. I don't know a job that doesn't require you to tolerate a colleague that's awkward or hard to deal with, or a certain parts of your job. When I was a family lawyer, I tolerated the calculation of spousal support. I enjoyed working with clients to create safety or to work on the best interest of the child. The numbers were a part I tolerated. That didn't lead me to hate the work. What I'm saying is, in a non-perfectionistic way, if you look at it softer focus, is your work something that you would be overall fulfilled by? Does it help you express who you are? In part because when I was a lawyer, I didn't get to do the kind of work I'm doing now. And the kind of work I'm doing now is actually making a difference, I think. And if I had kept doing that, where I was doing good work, I've won at trials, I got a Court of Appeal win under my belt. I mean, I've done work. I never felt really great about it. I'm like, great, winning at the Court of Appeal was fun. It was an accomplishment. I like accomplishment. But was the subject matter important? Discoverability in a civil litigation case? I can go the rest of my life never discussing discoverability again. I'll be fine. But if you want to talk to me about human motivation and pain and depression, I'll talk to you about it for hours because it fuels me. That's not so much about fun as it is about fulfillment, about being who I am as much as I can be who I am. And the inverse of that is doing work that is absolutely out of alignment with who you are. So beyond just tolerating the work, working with superiors who are abusive. There's no learning to like that. Working in an area of law that, if you're a survivor of domestic assault and you're a Crown, or you're a defense lawyer and you're representing alleged abusers, some lawyers really like that. Others are quite triggered by it. There's no learning to like that. You can learn to like Windows because Windows is awesome. I've been using Windows my whole life. Aside from, I'm actually I didn't do coding, but in the 80s they taught us DOS and COBOL and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
wow.
but I mean, I didn't know much of it. We just did little quickie little programs. But this is about learning Windows is about, it's part of your job. And if you want to do the job that you otherwise like, there are elements of it you're going to have to learn to at least tolerate. And maybe you'll learn that it's actually not as bad as you thought. I liked court. I also hated court. I liked the challenge of being on my feet. I liked the challenge of advocacy and convincing a judge of the outcome I think is right, and the intellectual challenge of the to and fro. The adversarial process was really interesting. It was fun in many ways. It was also often so toxic because opposing counsel was often toxic. and uncivil, maybe even mean. So I was my blood pressure always went up when I got at the time a fax from them or an email from them, or the fact that I had to be in court. I liked the arguing. I didn't like the pettiness. So there were elements I could learn to tolerate. I could learn to tolerate, angry opposing counsel, as long as I actually like parts of it, as long as I'm getting something out of parts of it. And what I came to understand in terms of my journey was it wasn't worth it. It was causing me too much distress. I was anxious a lot of the time, in part because it really wasn't what I was built to do. I'm not built to go and argue with people. I'm good at it. I can do it, but it didn't fit me. I was a fish trying to climb a tree because sometimes I could do it and I could do it well. So I felt good about myself. But your initial question was about why are we always thinking that things need to be fun? I think it's and you also asked about, are we too focused on emotion? I think you said, or too interested in emotion. I think we're not interested enough in emotion. We escape emotion, we avoid emotion, we push down emotion, we tranquilize emotion. We are not generally good with just being with emotion without letting it overwhelm us and debilitate us. When we grow up, we're often taught, just deal with it, or I don't want to hear about that, or whatever. So we're taught to put down our emotions, which means we are invalidating our experience. We're stuffing it away and it's sitting inside of us and it's festering, but it's in our unconscious. So we don't really attend to it, but it shows up when we're triggered by things in the world or whatever. I think emotion is powerful and important. It's often, classified in a gendered way, right? Women are emotional and men are logical. Oh, bullshit. Men are emotional as hell. And it's good. It's just that we're taught not to be. We're taught that it's weakness. It's jello in your hands. You can't hold on to emotion. I can hold on to an equation. I can hold on to a process. I can't hold on to anxiety. And so if I can't define it and name it, I don't know how to deal with that. And the way you deal with it is you don't think about it. You don't abstractly process it. You sit with it. You feel it in your body. You let it go through you. When you process emotion, you can come out the other side of the emotion. You can start to learn from it. You can feel like an engaged, plugged in person. I benefit so much from being an emotional person, from sometimes feeling other people's emotions without having them overtake me. It's healthy to be emotional, as it is healthy to be intellectual and think and organize. We very much don't overemphasize emotion. I think we're not emphasizing it enough, or at least we're not emphasizing treating it in a healthy way.
Is this why we need therapists to identify our emotions, maybe hidden emotions, because they drive our behavior, whether we know it or not?
I love we need therapists, because self-servingly, yes, you need therapists. You don't need therapists, but it can be very, very helpful in gaining perspective on your internal world. You're too close to it sometimes. People who, let's say, have been traumatized are blinded by their traumatic experiences. Those traumatic experiences often teach them distorted narratives about themselves, about the world. A child who's been harmed won't come away thinking, boy, that was a bad grown-up. They'll likely come away thinking there must be something wrong with me, because to a child, they are the center of the universe. And what we see in trauma is that child who has come to a conclusion there's something faulty with them, that if bad things happen to them, it's their fault. That child will often become perfectionistic, because maybe if I'm perfect, bad things won't happen. It's because I have control over it. I can do something about it. I can just be awesome. I can be the best, and therefore I won't attract negative attention. That child grows up to be an adult who looks at the world the same way the child looked at the world. That adult doesn't stop self-blaming and self-judging. That adult continues the narrative the child created. They then enter therapy, and the therapist hears the narrative, and in a compassionate and delicate way, the therapist can hold a mirror up to them and show them, have you ever met a 5-year-old child? They're not culpable for anything. They're innocent, they're pure. They have little brains with no life experience, and they're just being. You can't hold a 5-year-old responsible for anything. If my daughter burned down this house, it wouldn't be her fault. She's 5. There's a reason why we don't let people vote till they're 18 or join the army or drink by a certain age. Children are forming people. They're not complete. They're not even close to complete yet. Teenagers still have, frontal lobes of their brain forming. They don't have great executive functions. But the person who's been through that then goes to a therapist and says, I'm in all this pain. I can't have good relationships. I can't communicate with my partner. I'm always afraid I'm going to be rejected. I don't have any friends. And the therapist can listen to the whole story and say, I can see potentially where this comes from, even though you haven't been able to because you've been in the middle of the storm. So the emotions, the traumas, the scars are often hidden from us because we're almost too close to them to see them or to judge them objectively. The therapist brings objectivity and non-judgment. The individual is judging like crazy, completely subjective. The therapy allows a more neutral, compassionate perspective that they may not have even considered.
Do you think you need to be a little bit screwed up to be a super achiever? So I follow this famous Olympian on Instagram, and she's just one of the top super elite athlete, and she already retired, but she posts her workouts. So she works out a lot, and once she posted the workout that included vomiting in a bucket, and she proudly wrote about it as a sign of the effort, of the length to which she goes to achieve, even now when she's not a professional athlete anymore. And a lot of people posted there basically accusing her of glorifying unhealthy behavior. So to many people, she's probably a little screwed up. So, but she's a super achiever. And don't you think that all super achievers are a little screwed up? Don't you think that it just takes being a little screwed up or a lot screwed up to be a super achiever in this world?
So I start with examining your premise, the value of achievement, the definition of achievement. What is a super achiever? Well, a super achiever is the top pole vaulter in the world is a super achiever. The person who stays home and raises lovely children, super achiever, raised lovely children. They put their energy into that. They may have even picked up some vomit because of that job. We ascribe value to things as achievement, non-achievement. That's why when I talked about the concept of success, lawyers striving for success, what's the definition of success? You know how many lawyers I've worked with over the years who got to Bay Street and were convinced they're supposed to be happy now, but they really weren't because they had artificially either self-defined or had the profession define for them what achievement is. And they discovered it ain't all it's cracked up to be because they didn't define success and achievement by their own metric. They defined it by an external metric. We do that all the time. It's kind of part of the human condition. So when you say screwed up, I need you to define your terms. We're all screwed up. We're all weird. We're all neurotic. We all have our stuff. Everyone's got their stuff, just different stuff. Does it take a certain kind of personality to be excellent at something? So I'm going to change achieve, only be super achiever, because in the way you framed it, it was achieve some thing that other people recognize, right? You know, the person who raises great kids isn't always recognized as having achieved something, but they've absolutely achieved something. It's kind of in family law, right? If the, you know, an old traditional family, a woman stays home and raises the kids while the husband goes off and becomes CEO of a multinational corporation, he's the achiever. Well, one of the reasons for, if they ever split up, one of the reasons for spousal support is she achieved too. He's there because of her too. This is a collective exercise. He didn't just do it. I know somebody who's got a license plate. He's moved out of the country now, so I won't feel bad about saying it. His license plate was basically said self-made. And I just thought, that car is driving on streets paid for by taxes by all kinds of people, and you did it all yourself, did you? That's a need to be It's a need to be superior, to be better than others. That comes from insecurity, not security. People who are secure don't need to be better than others. They just need to be themselves. And if others like it or don't like it or acknowledge it, hey, we're all people. I think if you're trying to achieve something like an Olympic goal, it could be because you were told this is what you should strive for. It could be because you love the sport and you got swept up in it and being the best was called to you. That's different. So when you say, do you need to be screwed up? It really depends. What are your motivations? Why are you doing it? Who has influenced you, good or bad? What is the system you're working within? The Olympic system is a certain kind of system, right? All the stories about Olympic gymnasts and the kind of grinder they go through, or the figure skaters. They've been known, like, it's almost like the abuse by coaches is the only way to be great. Well, then honestly, don't be great unless somehow you've been okay with abuse and you were probably a kid, so you didn't get a choice. So screwed up, sure, we're all screwed up. To me, it's, are you doing it because it really does feed your soul? Because you've identified, this is who I am. I love doing this. I love how this feels. It is aligned with who I am. I think of like a musician. I've known lawyers who would say, I shouldn't have been a lawyer. I should have been a poet. I should have been a musician, but I couldn't have made a living. But they're much more aligned with their values when they're playing music. They just may not be able to make a living out of it, or maybe they feared they couldn't make a living out of it, so they didn't pursue it. So they stayed in something where they made a nice living. They became the best. Were they happy? Some probably are, and some aren't. It's so individualized. The key is, you asked about what to look for, right? Earlier on, you asked about, how do you, what to look for in terms of being happy or distress. And I really believe it's okay to look at your life and say, do I like what I'm doing? Do I get anxious on Sunday night because I have to go to work on Monday morning? Or do I wake up on Monday morning and look forward to going to work? Or do I feel kind of neutral about it, but once I get into my workday, I feel pretty good about things? Am I dreading my work? Because the easier piece of your question is, can you notice when you're miserable? Not when you're thrilled. That's easy too. The middle stuff is hard. Lots of people are doing law profoundly unhappy and still doing it because they are not identifying that they're entitled to create a life that is, at a minimum, not miserable. I should be able to figure this out. I should learn to like this. I should learn to like opposing counsel yelling at me and calling me names. There's some things we can't learn to like and shouldn't, because they're not who we are.
Yes, those are the questions that every lawyer should learn to ask themselves, and you definitely made it clear, and you made it sensible and reasonable. And it's amazing that they are also very basic questions. Do I like what I do every day when I go to this office? Do I like it? Is it for me? What if I try something else? And for many people, they will not ask themselves this question because maybe they are afraid of the answer, and maybe they're afraid of change. I thank you, Doron, for this interview. This has been a great learning experience for me, and I appreciate your time, and I'm sure that our audience will also learn a lot and have learned a lot. So thank you so much, Doron.
It is my honor. Thank you.